this waking nightmare, where all dreams come true. You searched for control, a way to pull through. When you were in love, you left him in tears, to smother your furies and banish your fears. But in darkness they came, through stormy black seas they raided these shores. Do you still hear his screams? And now that you're home, he's so far away. They've taken his soul. To these gods you cannot pray. They can break you, but not your promise. Even death won't keep you apart. Through this darkness you will find him. In your sword still beats her heart.
In 1930 Paris, a bronze cast was presented in an art museum. This behemoth is over 6 meters high, 4 meters wide, 1 meter deep, and weighs over 8 tons. The sculpture comprises of 180 independent figures from 15 centimeters high up to more than 1 meter. The sculptor was Auguste Rodin, the museum's namesake, who spent the last decades of his life to perfect this massive conglomerate of sculptures. He never finished his work. In the late years of his life, Rodin willed all his work, diagrams and sculptures to the nation of France to curate and exhibit them in a fashionable accord. To this day, 7 complete casts exist in different museums, all created from Rodin's unfinished molds. The casts differ from each other somewhat, as they are based on different molds from different time periods. No one is quite sure how the massive sculpture was to come together. Rodin made many changes, touch-ups and reworked multiple parts till the very end. The final form he took with him to the lands of the dead. One of Rodin's inspirations was Lorenzo Ghibretti's The Gates of Paradise at the Baptistry of St. John, Florence. A pair of 15th century bronze doors that depict figures from the Old Testament. Rodin's sculptures also contain a pair of doors, an entrance to something transcendent. But this gateway can't be opened. There are no hinges, no bolts. The dozens of sculptures layer each other in such a way, even with hinges, this door could not be opened. No one goes in, and no one goes out. Ghibretti's bronze doors were not the only piece of Renaissance art to inspire Rodin. His most vocal muse was Dante Alighieri and his poem Inferno, the first part of the epic The Divine Comedy, A Porte l'Enfer, the gates of hell. This sculpture leaves you baffled, in more ways than one. If you ever get past marveling the mastery required to create something like this, you're bound to ask yourself, why? Rodin sacrificed the last decades of his life to master this sculpture, this magnificent gateway, a monument to commemorate the most horrifying place ever depicted in the collective imaginations of mankind. It's an intriguing idea. Hell should receive a gateway of such immaculate beauty. That the underworld could be a place of such import, it demands a grand, awe-inspiring entrance. A fiery cave, sure, a smouldering chasm. Yes, a damp entrance to a crypt with eerie lights adorned with a couple of skulls with fiery red eyes. That's a proper entrance to the underworld. But that is a baffling idea. Until you realize, Rodin and Dante were not priests, they were artists. Discard the religious implications of the underworld and approach it as a drama. What if the underworld is not a place for the dead to reside in? a place where those who have died are cast off and kept. What if the marble hallways of hell were not hewn for the dead? One day, hopefully many years from now, we all will die. You, me, everyone you love, everyone I love. No one gets out here alive. In the end, everyone, everything, everywhere ends. You can't reason with death, barter with entropy. There are gods in this world to whom you cannot pray, who turn a blind eye to your suffering, a deaf ear to your pleas. Doesn't matter who you are, who you've become. At the end of the game, the king and the pawn return to the same box. No culture known to history would just dump their loved ones in a ditch somewhere, forget their existence and go on their merry way. There's always a process, a tradition, loss and reverie, awe and fear. The headstones of a cemetery, altars on sanctuaries, rites at a funeral. These traditions cater to the living as much as the dead. They ease the longing for those who remain here and offer aid to those who travel to there. Like death, the underworld is a cultural constant. Our minds can't fathom the experience of non-experience, the state of non-existence. If there is a here, there must be a there. If there is a plane of the living, then there must be a plane of the dead. That's clearly the best idea. Or do you suggest we are some sort of carbon-based multicellular organisms, mold from lifeless substances nurtured in the hearts of collapsing stars, our form constructed from billions of separate specialized microorganisms that operate through a neural network under the watchful eyes of tens of thousands of genomes, millions upon millions of streams of DNA, and that this conglomerate has in the time span of hundreds of millions of years gained a holistic awareness and partial sentience over this conglomerate, and the maintainment of this reproductive and self-sufficient state is what we perceive as life. And as the cellular decay one day topples the rate of cellular renewal, we slowly drift away, and the specific sentience which was specific to that conglomerate of cells in that time and space ceases to exist. That doesn't seem all that likely. Yes, we are clearly in a bubble of time and space that ever expands. It spans across untold billions and billions of leagues. The myriad of celestial bodies float around each other through unperceivable gravitational forces that not only curve out the observable matter, but the actual fabric of time and space itself. Occam's razor, folks. The land of the dead. Now that's a proper idea. What I mean is, the underworld, the life after death, is not just a superstitious mashup of fears and wish fulfillment. It's a phenomenological idea, a psychological state on the border of the conscious and the unconscious mind. Something between dream and reality. It's a daunting task to explain in clear, concise terms what the underworld is. It's a web of allusions and imagery that range from folklore to psychology, from tradition to the occult. If you have ever buried a loved one, been betrayed, received news of an ill fate, or even just received a nasty, undue comment from someone, you've been to an underworld of sorts. Now I can't tell you what the underworld is, but here are some things that spring to mind when I think of it. We are afraid of the darkness and all the horrors it entails. We are afraid of the unknown. We are afraid of death. Death is the greatest of the unknowns. We all will one day go, and none have returned. The most horrifying sea monsters live at the bottom of the abyss. Don't go off the map, that's where the monsters live. The dead are buried underground. The dead are gone forever. Wherever they go must be far away. The dead cannot escape. Something must guard them. The living can't follow to where the dead have gone. Something must block their path. The scariest monsters live in the darkest caves. When you walk through an unknown land, you need a guide. A grand prize demands a grand sacrifice. When someone dies, something important leaves. They are the same, yet they'll never be who they once were. The abyss holds all the things we know we fear, and all the things we don't know we fear. Monsters that live in the darkness often hoard treasure. The dead hold the knowledge long lost to us. The dead can see things invisible to us. Monsters are afraid of fire, afraid of the light. The light shelters us from the darkness, from the unknown. The things we need to find are often found where we least want to look. We are afraid of violence, of being hurt, of being broken. We are afraid the darkness, the unknown, will devour us. The night is darkest before the dawn. The things we are afraid to confront wait for us in the depths. When you read this list back to back, few things become clear. The underworld is not an actual place. It's a state of being, a dreamscape where you descend or plummet in search of something, to seek out what was lost, a way forward or a way back. And these structures, hallways, fields, mazes and caverns weren't built for those who reside here. These roads were not laid for those who have died. The underworld isn't a place for the dead to reside in. It is a place for the living. Why seek the lands of the dead? Why do we search guidance from the ones who are gone? Confluence with the dead does sound a bit alien to us modern types. Redundant, childish. What could the dead offer us? We have more information, more facts, better scientific protocols, advanced technology, data, accurate measurements and the numbers to back that up. We are more moral, we have better values. The old, decrepit world is gone, and our bright future has stepped forward from the shadows of the past and left all that was behind. We have no need for the dead. People didn't used to think like this. It was the ones who had contacted those who had been here before you ought to listen. The elders, the shamans, the mystics, who understood the nature of the world and knew its inner workings, who had survived this world the longest. Those who could speak with the tongues of the dead. Like parents groom their children, like the master shapes the apprentice, those who had been here before knew the way forward. And now they were gone, behind valleys of darkness, across rivers of knives, beyond forests where the night reigns eternal, guarded by beasts. The departed held the knowledge we needed to navigate our world, the wisdom they took with them to the lands of the dead. When the light grows dim, seek those who know what waits beyond the darkness, who've searched from where you least want to look. When you lose your way, it is the dead you need to seek counsel with. Senua had a tragic life. One foul day, weeks, months, maybe years ago, the Northmen arrived to her home shores, raided her village. Everything was burnt down. That which wasn't was stolen. Every man was slain. Those who weren't were taken as slaves. The most gruesome fate of all fell on Dillion, the chieftain's son, Senua's great love. The Northmen strung him up and offered his soul to Hela, the half-rotten goddess of the underworld. One of the strange gods of the north, Senua doesn't know how to pray to. She'd already had a life filled with loss, abuse, neglect and guilt. The sickness of the spirit described only as the darkness had kept her as its own her entire life. Dillion was her only light, a bonfire that kept the dark at bay. Now he was gone, and in what a way. She grabbed her sword and set sail to Hell, the underworld of the Northmen. The land of the dead, where those who've met an unworthy end reside. Those taken by sickness, by old age, who ran away. Those who wouldn't grasp the sword when needed, or speak up when called upon. Those deemed unworthy of the great halls of Valhalla are sent here, to Hell. If Dillion was sacrificed to the strange gods of the north, then his soul must be trapped here. It's up to Senua to reclaim Dillion's soul. She begins her journey through Hell, accompanied only by the voices inside her head and the severed head of her love. James's world was also ravaged by a sickness. For 3 long years it ate away his wife, turned her into a misshapen husk of a woman he fell in love with, and then she was gone. There was no catharsis, no somber goodbyes. Love was not able to conquer all. James receives a letter years later from Mary, his departed wife. The town of Silent Hill, their special place. There she'll wait for him. And so James descends into the fog. A voyage to the underworld is a shamanic quest of self-discovery, an inner journey to retrieve what was lost, to heal what was shattered, to reclaim what is most valuable. For love, no cost too high, no sacrifice too great. Senua and James both need to come into grips with something external, the cruel malevolence that broke Dillion, the indifferent pestilence that consumed Mary. But the descent into the underworld is a descent within. Senua must face the darkness that resides in her, and James has to unearth the shadows he repressed during those lonesome years of sickness. Both are victims of a terrible fate, but walk through a hell they've molded with their own hands. The underworld is laden with places we visited, structures we've erected, and populated with monsters we have given birth to. I'm fascinated by the idea that a certain type of deterioration of the mind could be a gateway to some inaccessible part of our consciousness, that a sacrifice, whether voluntary or not, could open up different ways to view the world. Senua and James are consumed by trauma and sickness. Many a thing gnaws their soul. Years of suffering has enabled them to see things invisible to the common. It isn't explicit whether this capability to see behind the veil of reality is just a curse. Religious and mystical traditions are filled with stories and practices to expand one's capability to perceive the world. Many forms of meditation, dance, substance intake, starvation, flagellation, seclusion, deprivation of all sorts. Odin, the Norse king of the gods, cut out his eye and threw it in a well to gain wisdom over everything, to learn the secrets of the runes. He ran himself through a spear and hung himself from the branches of Yggdrasil, the great world tree at the center of the world. There he hung for 9 days and nights. The Aztec god Nanahuatzin, the one full of sores, sacrificed himself in a fire so he could become the sun and shine light on the world. If even the gods must suffer for their wisdom, who are we to act any different? The way we perceived the world was very different not so long ago. The membrane between us and the gods was lucid and flexible. Now we have grown rigid. We have driven all our cumbersome, weird thoughts into the farthest reaches of our collective consciousness, shoved them inside a small box labeled ancient hokum and superstition, and thrown away the key. Our poets and artists were once mystics and shamans. Our madmen were once prophets and oracles. I'm tempted to stretch this romantic notion as far as I can. Maybe all suffering could act as a gateway to a deeper understanding. This notion is false, tempting as it is. There is an arbitrary, indifferent nature to being. Nietzsche wasn't quite right. What doesn't kill you doesn't always make you stronger. Some blows leave fractures, some wounds fester for years. Not all journeys to the underworld are heroic, filled with mythic meaning and hidden possibilities. Not all tragedies that happen upon us are linked in a causal chain we can unearth, inspect, and learn from. Sometimes a cancer is just an overgrowth of cells that killed your wife. Alzheimer's is just a neurological fail state that robs reality away from your mother. the drunk driver who took away your son was just, shit happens. Often we just suffer, without purpose, without end in sight. There are gods to whom we cannot pray. But there are times when it's not so. When you're pulled into the underworld by loss, sickness, betrayal or malice, the question in need of a honest answer is, why? Just how guilty am I? Do I deserve to walk these horrid corridors, these desolate shores? Perhaps you don't want to know. Regardless of the nature of our suffering, there is a difference between a plummet to the underworld and a descent. Maybe the difference is just strength of character, the will to answer truthfully to the questions laid out, the willingness to bear suffering. To end up in hell is so easy, it's almost mundane. It's the willing descent that's tricky. To claw yourself through hell, that's the hero part in the hero's journey. There is an old mythic idea: what you need is found where you least want to look. In their quest for the Holy Grail, each Knight of the Round Table starts their journey the same way. They enter the forest from the point that seems darkest to them. Grendel, the monster Beowulf, lives inside the darkest cave, hidden beneath watery abyss. Theseus fights the Minotaur of Crete inside a labyrinthian cave to save the fair children of Athens. Joseph Campbell summarized this mythological archetype in The Hero with 1,000 Faces. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Similar idea is found in the alchemical tradition. In filth, it will be found. Centuries later, the Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung phrased this old adage: where your fear is, there lies your task. It's no wonder the land of the dead, the literal resting ground for the unknowns of our unconsciousness, is nigh on impossible to reach, protected by monsters, governed by strife. Before Dante came faced with the entrance to Inferno, his path towards home was blocked by 3 great beasts. He was forced to wander the dark forest before he reached the gates of hell. Abandon all hope, ye who enter. To reach Helheim and save his brother Baldur, Heimdr had to ride for 9 days and 9 nights through valleys so dark he couldn't see anything. He then came to Jalarbru, the great bridge that ran across Hjol, the river that separates the land of the living from the lands of the dead. There he was confronted by the fierce warrior Mogdud, a giant maiden who wouldn't let Heimdr pass lest his mettle and cause for entry were deemed worthy. And all this before Garm, the wolf beast prophesied to be unleashed onto the world at the end of all times. To reach Tuonela, the land of the dead in the Finnish folklore, you need to hike for weeks through the wilderness to reach the stream of Tuoni, the river that separates the living from the dead. You can try to deceive the fairy woman Tuonentutti with a disguise, or just swim across, but the river is filled with iron nets. It overflows with blades, axes and needles which cut and prick those who try across. Tutti gives a ride for those who have led good lives. The dead whom have done bad deeds swim their way through. Many are the ones who go in, but few are the ones who return. To rescue his love from the underworld, the Greek poet Orpheus had to pay a reward to the ferryman to cross the river Styx and Acheron. At the gates of the underworld, Cerberus, the 3-headed dog, waited for him. To reach Helheim, Senua must also cross a great bridge which carries her over the River of Knives. A place she too found as she wandered through the wilderness for untold stretches of time. James was more lucky with his lot. He just took the 7-3 to reach his entrance to hell. The Netherrealms are beyond leagues and leagues of wastelands where no road goes, barred by gargantuan gates and populated by horrors no one can outrun. They are not just the deterrents to keep the right people in, the dead, and the wrong people out, the living. They are a challenge. A ferocious beast is a gatekeeper in more ways than one. Only the most important of things force us to tread against grand ordeals, against ferocious beasts and other horrors that reside in the dark. You have to be determined, desperate to go forth. You'll only move forward if staying still is scarier than what waits you in the deep. It's a strange idea that the light which will guide you through the darkness can only be found from the darkest depths of the abyss. And the strangest thing of all, this weird idea seems to be true. We tend to remember the lessons we paid dear for. The truths acquired through suffering seem to hold most value to us. Only the accolades received through tribulations feel meaningful. Only by a descent through the Inferno can we ascend to see the starry night sky once more. The underworld is the long dark night of the soul, and it will not go by waiting. When you travel through unknown lands in search of something lost, you need a guide. And the lands of the dead are no different. Dante had Virgil, Odin had the head of Mimir, and Theseus had a ball of yarn. Senua is guided by the voice of Druth, a hermit, a shaman, a madman she met in the wilderness on her exiles. A former slave and captive of the north, Druth was privy to their ways, legends, and the strange gods the Northmen worshipped. His fervorous recounts of those myths and legends form the backbone of Senua's journey. The elegy of Sigurd, Balder, the fairest of the gods, cut down in his prime by a cruel joke of fate, Surt, the fire giant who would one day burn the world, Hela, the half-rotten queen of the dead, Garm, guardian of the underworld, whose kin would one day devour the sun and the moon, the great sword Tyrving that could slay even the gods, Ragnarok, the death of the gods, the end of all times. These tales spring to life inside Senua's broken mind. Senua's descent into hell is a glorious mix of a monomythic quest and a full-blown psychotic breakdown. Without a guiding voice, she'd be lost in this decrepit unreality. Senua never saw the Northmen who raided her home shores, only the desolation they left behind. We only see what Senua feels, the projections of fears made vivid by Druth's recounts. Men, more beasts than human, they tower over Senua, swarm and overpower her with ease. Helheim is a land of blood, fire, death, desolate, charred, ravaged by pestilence. As Senua descends into hell, she fights through Druth's horrors as much as her own. A psychosis-ridden warrior lives through the recounts of a mad, broken hermit. A lifetime of abuse conjoins with trauma, guilt, and tall tales. Silent Hill is a personal hell. It caters not to the wants of its dwellers, but to their needs. Some aspects are common, some remain hidden to everyone else. The underworld is a different place to everyone. If Senua is guided by myths and legends, James walks in the footsteps of Freud, Jung, and Robert Flood. Psychoanalytic theory and the alchemical tradition conjoin into a macabre union. The disfigured fruits of this marriage wander the streets of Silent Hill, fester in its soil. Instead of a spirit guide, James is led deeper by the cathartic process, his unconscious need to regain wholeness. His projections of the anima, the shadow, the id, the ghosts of the psychoanalytic traditions push him further towards individuation. Bound, featureless, feminine bodies ooze pestilence over James. Seductive nurses flail, scream, seek him out. Their mouths are gagged, faces hidden, covered, smothered. Cage-bound bodies loom over James, ache to tangle him, to suffocate him. The Pyramid Head, a judge who torments and drives James ever deeper towards the truth, towards catharsis, ceaseless, unyielding. An executioner who again and again destroys Maria, James' idolized projection of his late wife. A huge blade is shoved inside her, a long spear penetrates her body. Rooms made of flesh throb, the holes in the walls penetrated by rough metallic pistons, back and forth, ravenous, frustrated, unfulfilled. Endless rusted corridors, mazes that never end, staircases and wells that lead deeper, always deeper. The bottom reveals itself a new surface, and we continue our descent. In sterilinquis inventur, in filth it will be found. You don't have to be a psychology major to grasp what type of emotions roam within James, what longs to be unearthed. There is little difference between a descent through hell and to witness the darkest aspects of your being. Senua and James journey through hell they've laid themselves stone by stone, battle monsters they've given birth to. They've made flesh by guilt, animated by trauma, wander in hallways hewn from longing. Whether haunted by spirits or projections, myths or psychoanalysis, the end goal remains the same: to mend which was broken, to seek what was lost, to go deeper. The imagery may change, but the story remains the same. If no one chased you, would you move forward? Without suffering, would you understand the value of what you uncover? If the world wasn't lit aflame, would you rush deeper? Regardless of how and why you end up in the depths, the underworld only has one exit. We need to go deeper. Reality becomes a meaningless concept when you are on a journey of self-discovery through spiritual visions and archetypal imagery. We cast ourselves to a bottomless pit, only to find ourselves at the surface, wander endless corridors inside a small wooden shack, walk on stairways stitched together from broken shards of reality. When you state hell isn't real, the only right retort is, what do you mean by real? This world isn't hewn from stone. These roads are not asphalt, nor these walls concrete. These monsters aren't of flesh and blood. We are somewhere outside the natural world, beyond sleep and dream, mind and matter. This place isn't bound by the whims of logic and physics. It makes no sense, yet it does. Though bewildering, it all feels familiar. It should. After all, we built this place all on our own, laid its foundations brick by brick with our own hands. We stared at the blinding glare of the flashlight, the warm glow of the campfire with such ferocity, we convinced each other the darkness doesn't exist. It's an error to say we fear the dark, that we are rattled by the darkness. Children fear the dark, the unknown it entails. We are afraid of the light, what it may reveal to us. We don't understand why we need to go into the darkness, why we must confront the horrors in wait. We can't explain it, yet we know it must be done. We need to plummet ever deeper into the unknown, because behind us there is nothing. Fear, pain and death may wait us in the darkness, but what lays behind us is so much worse. Stillness, decay, entropy. Go forward and you may die. Stay still and you will die. There is nothing to go back to. There is only the deep, the eternal gaping hole through which we must plummet again and again. This long, dark night of the soul will not go by waiting. We must seek from where we least want to look. Inferno was Dante's personal vision quest through not only the hierarchy of sin, but what hurts us the most, which transgressions ought to receive the harshest punishments, which sins are too great to recover from. Dante finds Judas from the heart of Inferno, trapped within frozen caves with Satan himself. Lucifer gnaws Judas, claws the skin from his back again and again, till the ends of all time. A punishment for his transgressions, his betrayal against Christ. Here, Dante finds his answer at the depths of hell. Deception cuts deepest into our soul. From betrayal, both parties walk away irreversibly damaged. The darkest depths of hell are reserved for traitors and betrayers. Tragedy is one thing. People get sick, people die. Malevolence is worse. But betrayal by a loved one who loved to be there in sickness and in health, now that's a wound that might never heal. In the Lakeview Hotel, James at last faces the reality he fought years to repress. The sickness didn't kill Mary. He did. From a distorted VHS tape, James watches as he takes a pillow and suffocates his wife. His reasons were just like us humans. Messy. He loved his wife, yet harbored a deep-seated hatred for her. He could not bear to see her suffer, yet longed to be free from the burden of a sick spouse. James couldn't bring himself to leave his wife, and yet he yearned fulfillment and solace in ways his wife never could satiate. All we know is, in the end, one day, he took the pillow and held it on Mary's face until she was no more. If James inspects Mary's letter after seeing the tape, we find out the paper is empty. There never was no letter. Only a blank piece of stationery stares back at James. En route to roof, James is confronted by the Pyramid Head one more time. This time, he has a doppelganger with him. Perhaps the id and the superego both arrived to render their judgment against the man who not only betrayed his wife, but himself as well. James kneels and admits his need of punishment. After all, the darkest depths of hell are reserved for traitors and betrayers. The monsters run themselves through spears. Their pursuit can end. The truth has been unearthed. James is finally whole. James' fate is decided by the player's actions throughout the game. Not all descents are heroic. Not all journeys through the underworld have a happy ending. Some things cut too deep. Some truths may break you beyond salvage. Not all find a stairway from the heart of the abyss. Some are doomed to wander these rusted hallways till the end of their days. Many are the ones who go in, but few are the ones who return. Senua's final confrontation is paralleled with Ruth's recounts of the Ragnarok, the death of the gods, the end of all times. A fitting end for a journey. In the annals of Norse mythology, a prophesied event looms over the gods and mortals alike. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. As the 3-year winter Fimbulvetr descends upon mankind, the signs of the coming catastrophe grow ominous. Man against man, brother against brother. Earthquakes shake the lands, chains that bind monstrous beasts are sundered. Wars rage unchecked. One by one, the gods and beasts alike fall. The world engulfs in flames. The stars fall from the heavens. The sun and the moon are devoured by wolves. Senua's quest never came just of love, courage, devotion, or her unyielding will. It was the darkness who gave Senua this quest, who conceived only by her sword would her heart still beat. The road to hell is eternal, the ranks of the monstrous Northmen endless. This journey isn't a courageous descent into the underworld. It's a distraction from the horrible realization the world is rudderless. As long as Senua remains steadfast on her quest, there's no need to deal with the truth. Dillion is gone. Now, it's Senua's turn to carve out her eye, to hang herself from the world tree. She lets go of everything and prepares for her last stand. Everybody dies, and after that, even the gods die. This last scene is quite something. Senua walks towards Hela, mows down everything the rotted queen throws on her way. The music, the constant kick drum, like a heartbeat, steady, elevated, reaffirmed. Dozens, maybe 100 fall under Senua's sword. Wave after wave of foes are cut down. Hell has been conquered. But in the end, as truth foretold, after a battle there is another battle, and then another, until we fall. And in the end, we do fall. Senua's last stand can go on indefinitely, but one against many isn't a stable state of affairs. Sooner or later, you'll slip. You get blindsided, overrun, you botch a parry. In the end, even the gods have their days numbered. Broken and beaten down, Senua confronts Hela, but she doesn't answer. To these gods you cannot pray. You can't reason with death, barter with entropy. Everyone dies, everything falls apart. Even the gods must one day die. Senua realizes Dillion was never here. His soul was never captured by Hela. He was never for us to save. There never was no quest. With nothing left, Senua resides to her death. Hela takes Senua's sword and runs her through. Senua recounts Dillion's words as life leaves her body. A life without loss is a life without love. Hela lifts Dillion's severed head from the ground, the gruesome token Senua carried with her all this time. The goddess lets go. All that remains of Dillion falls into the depths. The viewpoint shifts and we see Senua mourn her loss next to Hela's lifeless body. We've left with the question, how much of this journey was real? But what does that even mean in this context? If the transformation that waits us at the end of our journey is real, perhaps we should be content with that. Did Senua lay all this time on the shores of Orkney, just a stone's throw away from her burning village, the severed head of Dillion cradled against her chest? Or did she travel to Hell and outwit the queen of the underworld? A grand story doesn't need an ironclad law, and some questions are better left unanswered. Regardless of the realities in which this quest took place, one thing remains clear. Even after the twilight of the gods, even after a great beast has devoured the sun and the stars have fallen from the heavens, there is hope. From the ashes comes forth a new world with strange new gods and strange new legends. Senua lets go of Dillion and moves on without him. She walks away from death and chooses life. Listen, friend. The journey to the underworld is an archetype endured for millennia. Why? Because it speaks of something fundamental to our being. Loss and tribulation are unavoidable parts of the human experience, and we can feel powerless against such challenges. Yet, this myth reminds us we possess an inherent strength to persevere through the most daunting of challenges. Senua's quest may not have been real in the literal sense, but the wisdom learned from it is. Be they real or imagined, it is through our own journeys we overcome our suffering and find a new way forward.